Welcome to the Living Connected podcast. I'm your host, Mallory Meyer, a multi-six-figure entrepreneur, founder of White Wolf Reiki, and a former corporate HR professional turned polyvagal-informed leadership and neuro coach, Reiki master, educator, and international speaker. In this podcast, we explore the intricate connection between our nervous system and our performance, productivity, and well-being. I'm here to guide organizations, leaders, and founders in enhancing performance, fostering a psychologically safe workplace, and building teams with high retention that thrive. Let's future-proof your business, raise team morale, and prevent burnout. Join me weekly as we tap into discussions around regulating the nervous system, rewiring the mind, and enhancing wealth and success, with a splash of my love for energy healing and magic woven in as well. Here's to choosing to live more connected. Hello and welcome back, or welcome to, if this is your first time listening to the Living Connected podcast. I really couldn't think about a better way to kick off this brand new year of 2024 than commencing this podcast again. And especially during a lot of reflection and closing out 2023, I will address the elephant in the room of making a promise where I was committed at a point in time to show up more actively, to show up here weekly, to deliver consistent episodes. But I really do embody and practice what I preach. And this is very much around getting anchored and validating a message before creating omnipresence, which is simply just to say, you don't need to have your hands dipped in every single the marketing platform, the social media platforms, without really being diligent with one. And that's really why, not only through the pivot and the transitions that I was making behind the scenes, but truly giving my time and taking that evaluation, the expertise, the integrations, tweaking as necessary and appropriately to then come back and circle back into this podcast with just such confidence and clarity into how and who I am serving here, welcoming in 2024. And just before jumping into this episode around polyvagal theory to give you a great baseline understanding and prepare you moving into some future episodes as well with some of the language and the context of this work, the other element that I was very much reflecting upon closing out 2023 was, of course, lessons. And that being holding on to something because of attachment, rather than trusting in my own personal evolution. And I want to bring this forward because it is so common, whether you're an entrepreneur, a founder, and very unlike corporate, when we have someone tell us it's time to be promoted, there's no one there encouraging us to take this type of leap. So give yourself some grace and really lean in if you feel like it isn't necessarily an element of tweaking messaging and marketing and dissolving an offer per se, but rather this is your next stage. This is where you are being called to move into. I absolutely know where you're at and to trust yourself. So take that time, integrate, and also just don't feel that scarcity, because that was also an element that was coming up for me of time. And it's just so quickly how that can kind of be mirrored and shown. So with that being said, let's really tap into here confidently leading, because leadership is not just about, of course, leading others. It starts with us. It starts with the element of self-leading. And leadership to me truly transcends mere direction. It's very much this profound journey of self-mastery. In this dynamic relationship as well with business, I see true leadership as not just being the ability to steer the ship, we'll call it, in the right direction, but it's really about anchoring yourself in resilience, in adaptability, and emotional intelligence, which is where we enter this realm of polyvagal informed leadership coaching. This pivotal discipline that goes beyond conventional approaches. So I personally discovered polyvagal theory at the end of 2022. I was actually commencing and I started my certification with the Polyvagal Institute at the start of 2023. And it was really just starting to understand with polyvagal theory everything that we need to know about the nervous system and how we operate in terms of our feelings with safety. And that was really a missing piece for me to that point in my own entrepreneurial journey, where I felt like entrepreneurship, for one, can be so dysregulating as we're constantly asked to step beyond our comfort zones, but you can only have mindset take you so far. And this was really, again, linking together elements to help me soar in a way that I never even knew was possible at that point in time. So I was having all these epiphanies at the beginning of 2023 and just really flooded with so many different insights about when I was in corporate and starting to see, as I was not only working with leaders at that time, but for myself, consistently facing high demands and often just feeling like everything was emergent and how tiring and stressful that becomes. So, learning to regulate my nervous system has truly played that pivotal role in overcoming, in the last year specifically, mental, emotional, and health challenges that I've encountered to date as a high achiever. And this journey was not only an ability to really reduce my stress in half, but it also eliminated emotional barriers, leading to a wealthier, more time abundant, and present life. And as I was starting to reflect, it was also really beautiful to witness going through past client testimonials with other founders that I had already worked with in the other side of my business, was hearing that they were in a state of burnout when they came to me. Many of them were trying to dig themselves out of a hole. And with those tools that I already had without even knowing it, again, these kind of like weird magical ways that things will just appear when we open our eyesight to see them and we take a moment to pause. It was already there within me. And now it was just heightening it, unlocking it in such a different way. Polyvagal theory is related to our autonomic nervous system. So it is specifically focused on automatic responses. So think of this system as it has everything to do with our crucial functions like breathing, our heart rate, the temperature of our body, our digestion, but more so than anything, and this is kind of the digression of the work that I'm taking it, is how our brain functions. And very much why, because when we are in our rest and digest, when we have activated our parasympathetic nervous system, that is when we can engage with our executive functioning, our prefrontal cortex, which is so imperative as an entrepreneur to stay calm, to stay connected, to stay tethered to our purpose, to have an element of emotional control, to be focused, to prioritize. The list goes on and on. So, the whole element of polyvagal theory in itself was introduced by Dr. Stephen Porges, the creator of this theory. It really only came about in around 2014. So, this is where, from if you've only just started to hear what is polyvagal theory, likely perhaps why, because this is not like it has been a term coined for quite some time. But it really outlines three hierarchical states within the ladder, which is also known as like our autonomic ladder of the nervous system, which I won't get into too much depth in this episode today, but I will be mentioning it again later. And I have an invitation for you as well later to get to know about it more. Now, ideally, we should predominantly be residing in our upper states. Yet, we would only then briefly, if you can envision a ladder for me here right now, you'd be briefly descending down that ladder when you have moments of stress arise. However, many of us find that we may be predominantly operating in those lower states, in that lower level of the ladder, which is where you are operating from fight or flight or freeze. And this again is without having the right tools, without having the right resources, without even having simply here the own awareness that you are operating. And this is kind of like your primary space and your primary state of being. that is where you are depleting not only your adrenals and you are running on chronic stress, and you start to develop whether it's illnesses or pain. But this is why we want to be able to have some more fluidity in the ability to rise up that ladder and get you into parasympathetic. And this is really why in these states, in this hierarchical approach, we can address that sympathetic and the parasympathetic and see how it also influences our social behavior and connection to the world around us. It really has begun to offer so many incredible insights into the underlying states of our own human experience that profoundly impact our emotional, our physical, and our mental well being. So, to ask yourself here, what is that overarching aim of polyvagal theory? It's simply to underscore the significance of the autonomic nervous system and the vagus nerve in shaping our development and behavior. So, the core objective is to empower individuals in accessing their social engagement system and creating that environment where you yourself feel secure enough to connect with others and the world around you. So, with today's episode, we are tapping into 3 pivotal factors of polyvagal theory that collectively signal the body's sense of safety and connection for us to then bring our social engagement system online, where we then feel accessible within ourselves, feeling safe to put ourselves out there and really broadcast within our own physiology. Welcome. So, number 1 is neuroception as part of these 3 factors with polyvagal theory. Neuroception is essentially, I want you to think about, I always think like the siren on top of a cop car, and that little light that's circulating so quickly, really detecting our autonomic nervous system again. Is there a detection of threat in my proximity that you are not consciously aware of, but that is happening unconsciously? So it's perpetually scanning your system, your autonomic nervous system. It's scanning for cues of threat or danger for yourself in your environment to then assess your safety level. And that's where it's instantaneously shifting your states if it does detect a threat, which again, a threat where I live could be, yes, you could hear a rustle in the forest and your mind goes into there is a bear, there is a cougar. However, very much our brain does not know the difference between a bear and a cougar versus an angry manager coming down the hall or a very undescripted email that you may receive, and there's just no context provided to it. And so then you start ruminating and making these stories because we can't go beyond what the statement of, I need to talk to you, of the subject line has to say. So this is really where many of us can struggle with poor flexibility or a faulty detection of threat because we haven't really been able to distinguish, is this actually really different? And that's the job of neuroception. What is happening each millisecond in our environment? Number 2 is all about that hierarchy. So I absolutely love guiding clients. It's one of the first things that we do together in this work is to really start to acknowledge where are you predominantly operating from, and then starting to bring in the right resources, the right tools, and the inner work that is required to really start to be able to heal and bring together different parts. But without getting on that tangent, the hierarchy itself outlines 3 states within the autonomic nervous system, and that simply is being in your ventral vagal, which is known as your parasympathetic. You are safe, you are connected, you are again capable of accessing that social engagement system. The other element is then stress comes in. We get into our fight or flight, and that is more of our sympathetic, mobilized state. And then the last piece of our ladder is moving into more an immobilized state, such as dorsal, or how you may frame it as freeze. And that's very much of dissociation, hopelessness, really just kind of the disconnection and the lack of energy to do anything. And then last but not least is number 3, this aspect coined as co-regulation. And I feel like I can give you a whole episode around what co-regulation can bring, especially when you are working with others, whether they are your clients, whether they are individuals on your team, whether it's even your partner. But really, co-regulation involves the influence and receptivity of one nervous system to another and determining whether we feel safe enough to be in proximity to others. So, oftentimes, if you have ever walked into a room and all of a sudden sense this energy of it feels so anxious, it feels so stressed, oh my gosh, there's so much, not even, I want to use a word like aggression and anxiety in that atmosphere, that is because you are automatically, again, unconsciously receiving the dysregulation of another nervous system. And it can detect that it, again, with our neuroception, is perceiving a threat and therefore going down that ladder into fight or flight, likely. The language itself can be a lot to digest, and just be patient. If you need to come back and you need to re-listen, great. But I'd love to hear from you how this landed, where you're at, and what you're most looking forward to hearing more about. Feel free to send me a message over at Leader Mindshift, or you can feel free to give me a follow over on LinkedIn. I'd also just love for you to really ask yourself, where are you now when it comes to that ladder? Where do you believe that you are operating from most predominantly in the times that you have, whether at work, whether at home, whether with others? How does that look like for you? I'd also love to invite you to my upcoming free masterclass. This is happening on January 23rd. It is called Leading with Ease. It's all about nervous system harmony for resilience and high performance. We are tapping into so much more depth around understanding the language of your nervous system, how it operates the way it does, polyvagal theory, and even sharing with you exercises that can instantaneously shift you and activate your vagus nerve so you can start to enhance not only your vagal tone more frequently, but really start to bring in that greater level of engagement to your parasympathetic and get into that rest and digest. So thank you again for being here. And again, I truly have just found this work to be so profound of an impact. And this is a pathway to really start to unravel the mysteries of stress and foster genuine connections, not only within your own relationships, but to truly cultivate a thriving workplace culture that will contribute to greater profit, productivity, well-being, and lowering costs to attrition as well. Of course, for those ready to take this further, who don't want to necessarily wait for the battery to be drained before doing something about their own well-being and enhancing their performance, really being proactive about their own journey, I do have one-to-one coaching opportunities, and you can move forward by scheduling a call that is within the show notes to explore that mutual fit, while also extending organizational trainings and workshops, which I also invite you to book a call to explore how that could be delivered. In the meantime, sending my best to stay regulated. Let me just take a moment to share something that has truly elevated my mornings and helped me start my day on a greater, calm, focused, even with a punch of veggies note. I've integrated Plant People gummies into my morning routine, and their products have become an essential part of my self-care. What I really find sets Plant People apart is their commitment to quality and transparency. It's a natural and plant-based approach to self-care that aligns perfectly with my values. But the greatest part about it is whether it's been a tea, a gummy, or even their spreads, they don't compromise on taste. So who doesn't like treating yourself to a moment of indulgence while nourishing your well-being? And I do have something special for you, the listeners here. Plant People is offering an exclusive discount. You can use the code MALMEYER and I should say it's mal.meyer at checkout to enjoy 15% off your order. You won't want to miss this opportunity, and you can find those full details in the link in the show notes below.